Have you ever stopped to think about the objects scattered around your home? The everyday things that you touch, see, and use without a second thought? Could some of them be more than just inanimate possessions? Could they carry with them something darker, a shadow of influence that we scarcely notice? Imagine, just for a moment, that an object, an innocent-looking object perhaps, could hold within it the power to disturb, deceive, or even destroy, a seemingly benign trinket or knick-knack that in truth is far from harmless. This may sound outlandish, but when we look closely at the world we live in, the objects we accumulate are often more than mere decorations or conveniences. They can be the silent influences of our hearts and minds. Consider, for instance, the portrait on the wall. A beautiful piece of art that you've admired for years, yet behind its frame lies a story, a history that you don't know, but which might not be as innocent as you think. What if it's not just a painting? What if it's something that taps into hidden fears, something that draws out emotions you hadn't expected to feel, feelings that lurk just beneath the surface, waiting for the right trigger? Then there's the old clock that ticks away, always in the background. Its rhythmic sound now woven into the fabric of your daily life. But have you ever stopped to wonder what this object might represent? It tells time, yes, but does it also remind you of a moment in your past that you wish to forget? Every tick, every tock might carry with it the weight of those memories, just as some objects have the power to shape our perception of the future, whispering to us unspoken anxieties. Time, after all, is a ruthless reminder of all that we cannot control. Think about the worn-out chair by the window. It's the one you always sit in when you're alone, staring out into the world. What thoughts does it stir within you? A sense of comfort, or perhaps a hidden discomfort? Does it bring you peace, or does it make you reflect on the solitude you've been avoiding? There are some chairs, some spaces, where we find ourselves trapped, not by the physical boundaries of the room, but by the invisible walls created by our own thoughts. And sometimes it's the objects we spend the most time with that begin to subtly imprison us. Now take a moment to reflect on the books that line your shelves. The ones that have been passed down through generations, the ones that are supposed to be full of wisdom, yet hold within them ideas that challenge the very foundation of your beliefs. Words, as powerful as any sword, can cut deeper than any material weapon, and ideas, once planted, have the power to grow into something far more dangerous. What might you be inviting into your mind without realizing it? The books you choose to keep, the ones you allow to fill your home, can either build you up or break you down, subtly bending your mind to the will of another's thoughts. And then, of course, there are the countless little things, trinkets, gadgets, small treasures that have been collected over time. These objects, while they may seem insignificant, are often tied to moments of joy or sorrow, love or loss. Perhaps you hold on to them because they remind you of someone, something, or some time in your life that you cannot let go. But have you ever asked yourself if those memories are truly worth preserving? Or are they simply anchors, tethering you to a past that no longer serves you, preventing you from moving forward? Take a moment to consider the mirrors in your home, the smooth, reflective surfaces that show you your own image. We gaze into them daily, searching for something. But what is it we're truly looking for? Sometimes a mirror doesn't simply reflect your face. It reflects the doubts, fears, and insecurities that you try to hide from others and even from yourself. The reflection is not just of your physical self, but of the unseen parts of your soul, parts that can be distorted by the objects you surround yourself with. There is perhaps a temptation to dismiss the influence of these objects as nothing more than superstition or fanciful thinking. After all, how could a simple item, an object of little value, wield any real power over us? Yet, when we examine history and the lives of countless individuals, it's evident that the seemingly insignificant can have an outsized impact. Some may call it a coincidence when an object seems to stir up an emotion or memory at just the right moment. But those who pay attention to the patterns of their lives know that coincidence can be a feeble excuse for forces far greater than we care to admit. Take, for example, the rare antique that you inherited from a distant relative. A piece of furniture, a pendant perhaps. Its value is not in the material, but in the connection it represents. It stands as a marker, an artifact from a different time, and with it, it carries not just the history of its previous owners, but their desires, fears, and dreams as well. The energy of the past, like a ghost, clings to it, whether you recognize it or not. It may have served them in ways you cannot understand, but now, in your hands, does it still hold sway? Does it continue its work from the shadows, silently influencing your choices, your life, even your thoughts? In fact, we might ask ourselves, how many times have we found ourselves inexplicably drawn to a certain object, a thing we never intended to purchase or keep, yet somehow it finds its way into our home? It could be a peculiar trinket or a mysterious relic, something that didn't speak to our minds, but rather to something deeper within us, something we couldn't put into words. It's almost as if the object itself is the one pulling at our hearts, coaxing us into making it part of our world, as if it recognizes the hidden desires and fears we haven't yet faced. The idea of demonic influence, of course, is often dismissed in the realm of logic and reason. We like to believe that what we can't see doesn't exist, or that what we don't understand is simply nonsense. But if we are honest with ourselves, don't we all know, on some level, that the material world is not just a collection of things, objects to be owned, used, and discarded, but rather a complex web of forces, each one interacting with the others in ways we may not fully comprehend? The same way we cannot see the wind, yet can feel its presence in the rustling of leaves, so too might the presence of something unseen in our homes affect us in ways we may not always notice. And what of the technology that we invite into our lives? Smartphones, computers, television sets, all devices designed to make our lives more convenient, more connected, more efficient. But what is the true cost of this convenience? These objects, while seemingly neutral, are increasingly a part of our consciousness. They track our every movement, our interests, our habits, shaping our thoughts and desires in ways that we may not fully understand. Are they truly just tools, or have they become something far more insidious, pulling us away from what is genuine and real until we are no longer in control? As consider also the objects that we use for entertainment, the movies we watch, the shows we binge, the music we listen to, the games we play. These seemingly innocuous forms of distraction have the ability to shape our minds and even manipulate our emotions. They present us with a version of reality that may seem comforting or thrilling, but in truth, they may be altering our perceptions, feeding us false ideas, or stirring desires that lead us further away from who we truly are. It's not the object itself, but the way it engages with our deepest needs and vulnerabilities that grants it power. The challenge is not in denying the potential influence of objects in our lives, but in understanding the role we allow them to play. Do we bring these objects into our lives out of necessity, or do we choose them because they fulfill some unspoken need within us? Are we aware of the emotional and psychological weight they carry? The objects in our homes are not mere decorations. They are reflections of who we are, who we were, and perhaps even who we could become. They hold stories, memories, and desires, sometimes consciously known, but often hidden in the recesses of our hearts. The true danger, perhaps, lies not in the objects themselves, but in the way we allow them to define us, shape us, or entrap us within their influence. To live thoughtfully is to understand that we are not passive participants in our environment, but active agents in the creation of our own reality. The objects around us are like mirrors, reflecting our innermost selves, our desires, our fears, and our dreams. And just as a mirror can distort the truth, so too can the objects in our lives lead us down paths that we may not have chosen had we fully understood the forces at work. It is a reminder to tread carefully, to consider what we bring into our homes, and to understand that, in this world of hidden influences, even the smallest things can have the power to shape the largest parts of who we are. As we move through life, we encounter objects, things that we collect, cherish, and perhaps forget about in the midst of daily routine. Yet the seemingly inconspicuous items we keep closest to us might be carrying with them an energy we cannot yet perceive. The small, quiet things, the coin from a faraway place, the trinket from a vacation, or even the family heirloom passed down through generations, could be the very things that influence us in ways far beyond their intended purpose. Each object, each possession, comes with a history, a story, whether we are aware of it or not. And in that history, there may be echoes of desires, fears, and unresolved emotions that continue to reverberate. Think, for a moment, about the photographs that adorn your walls. These are not simply frozen moments in time, but representations of people and places that have shaped your life. Yet in some of those photographs, do you ever feel the weight of something else, a sense of longing, of grief, or perhaps an unsettled emotion that has lingered over time? These images, innocent in their intention, carry with them the energies of the past. They may trigger memories of moments long forgotten, or rekindle emotions that were buried deep within. And in doing so, they have the power to draw us back into places and feelings we might not wish to revisit. Consider the furniture in your home, the places where you sit, stand, or lie down every day. These items, which seem to serve only practical purposes, are far more than simple structures. They are the environments in which you create your memories, where you retreat when you are tired or restless, and where you find yourself day after day. What energies are infused into these objects through repeated use? How many hours have you spent in that armchair, that desk, or that bed? Each hour shaping the object, but perhaps also, unknowingly, being shaped by it. The lines of a chair may curve with the comfort of years, but the deeper, unseen lines of its impact on your mind and spirit may also be etched into your very being. And then there is the constant presence of our technological devices, smartphones, tablets, computers. These items, which promise to connect us, to keep us in touch with the world, are paradoxically the ones that often keep us most disconnected from ourselves. Have you ever stopped to consider how the light from your screen, the endless stream of information, the notifications that flood your senses, might be conditioning your thoughts? How often do we find ourselves reaching for these devices in a reflective manner, unaware of how they shape our attention and desires? These objects are constantly influencing our minds, often without our conscious awareness, pulling us towards specific thoughts, emotions, and actions, whether we want them to or not. The ritualistic nature of using these devices, checking them in the morning, scrolling through the day, and the final glance before bed, creates an invisible connection. That connection may be comforting at first, but over time it becomes an invisible force, drawing us into its web. It is not the device itself, but the way it shapes our lives, our habits, and our mental landscape. The data we willingly give, the habits we form, and the emotions it stirs, these things collectively have a power that surpasses the object's physical form. In some sense, it is the same with the objects of the past, whether the heirlooms, the antiques, or even the gifts we were given in moments of great emotion. Those objects, while we may think they are simply physical representations of memory, also serve as anchors, attaching us to specific moments, places, or people. These connections can be comforting, but they can also be chains, holding us back from moving freely, from letting go, from truly living in the present moment. The object doesn't just represent a past, but it constantly pulls us toward it. It whispers in our ear, reminding us of what once was, whether or not we wish to remember. These influences, though subtle, are real, and they shape us in ways that we may not always recognize. The power of objects is not simply in their material value, but in the energy, memory, and emotion they carry. They are silent, often unnoticed, companions in our daily lives, but they are no less powerful for their silence. The way we surround ourselves with these things is telling. Do we keep them out of nostalgia, comfort, or necessity? Or do they serve to hold us in patterns of thought and behavior that we might not even notice? Consider, too, the way certain objects make us feel. A photograph of an old friend may bring warmth, but a memento of a past failure can stir up shame, self-doubt, or regret. An object from a trip may bring joy and excitement, but the same object, years later, could remind us of dreams that never came to fruition. We are shaped by these things, and in turn we may unwittingly shape our world through them. What we keep close to us, what we choose to surround ourselves with, is not simply a matter of taste, but of influence, an ongoing exchange between the object and the self. This is where we come to the heart of the matter. The question is not simply about whether or not the objects in our lives have power. The real question is, what do they reveal about us? What do we allow them to tell us about who we are or who we want to be? And perhaps more importantly, how do we reclaim our agency in a world where objects so often speak louder than we think, quietly weaving their way into the tapestry of our lives, for better or for worse? As we continue to reflect on the influence of the objects around us, we must confront the notion that these seemingly neutral possessions are, in a sense, reflections of our inner lives. Just as we often curate the spaces we inhabit, carefully selecting what to display and what to discard, the objects we keep also curate us. Each piece, whether a cherished memento or a new acquisition, becomes an extension of our identity, marking something deeper about our desires, fears, and the stories we wish to tell the world, or perhaps the stories we try to forget. These objects don't simply decorate our space, they shape our inner landscape, acting as silent companions to our thoughts, emotions, and action. What is perhaps most unsettling is the idea that many of these objects are not neutral bystanders, but active participants in the formation of our lives. They may hold energies or memories that we are not fully aware of, influencing our decisions, our relationships, and even our sense of self. Take, for instance, the collection of gifts that you've received over the years. What did each one represent? A gesture of kindness, of love, or perhaps something more subtle, a reminder of an expectation or a relationship that once was? These gifts can become weighty in ways that have little to do with their material value. The objects that come into our lives through others may carry not only their intended message, but the complexities of our interactions with those people, and in a way they serve as anchors, drawing us back to certain moments, sometimes against our will, stirring emotions that we may not always want to revisit. Even the smallest object, something as simple as a coin, a piece of jewelry, or an old letter, can carry with it a profound emotional weight. It's the thing you glance at absent-mindedly, but which has the power to make you feel a rush of emotion in an instant. Why does that one object seem to hold such sway over your heart? It might be linked to a lost love, a distant memory, or a pivotal moment in your life. What begins as an object of affection or remembrance can, over time, transform into something that pulls you into the past, replaying an event or a feeling over and over. Whether you intend it or not, it traps you in a cycle of reflection or longing, preventing you from moving freely in the present. Consider the relationship between objects and memory. Objects are inherently tied to memory. They are markers of experience, whether joyful, but it's not just the act of remembering that holds power. It's the subtle way in which these objects influence our present state of mind. How often do we find ourselves looking at an old photograph or holding a gift from a long-forgotten friend, only to feel the weight of the past pressing down on us, as if that moment, that person, or that time were still alive within us? Even though the object itself is nothing more than a physical thing, it carries with it a certain presence, a haunting pull that can cause us to revisit feelings, regrets, or long-lost desires. This is where the power of objects is most evident. Their ability to tie us to something beyond ourselves, something beyond time, anchoring us in ways that may feel comforting, but are ultimately confining. The true danger lies in the fact that we are often unaware of the subtle influence these objects have on us. We assume that we are in control, that we choose the things that surround us based on our desires and preferences, but in reality, we are often shaped by them in ways that remain hidden beneath the surface. Objects can dictate the direction of our thoughts, the rhythms of our emotions, and even the way we perceive the world around us. In this way, they become more than just possessions. They are mirrors reflecting the unseen forces within us, forces that we may not fully understand or be ready to confront. There is a fine line between possession and being possessed, and it is this line that we must carefully navigate. When we collect objects, we are not simply collecting things. We are collecting parts of ourselves, parts of our history, and pieces of the identities we create. Some of these objects are life-affirming symbols of growth, love, and joy. But others may be shackles, holding us captive to a past that no longer serves us. These objects may not be malevolent in the traditional sense, but they hold a subtle power nonetheless, shaping our thoughts and emotions, often without us even realizing it. The danger is that, over time, we may come to define ourselves by the very things that should be tools, not masters. How often, then, do we allow ourselves to be defined by the things we surround ourselves with? How often do we build our identity around our possessions, thinking that the accumulation of things somehow validates us, gives us meaning, or helps us forget? We buy objects, not because they truly serve us, but because they fill a space in our lives that we are unwilling to confront. The problem arises when those objects start filling more than just physical space. They begin to fill emotional and mental space too, and we allow them to shape our identity in ways that limit our potential. It's a paradox. We keep objects because they are meant to serve us, to bring comfort or joy into our lives. Yet in doing so, we may unknowingly be giving them the power to serve themselves, to create their own narrative in our lives, dictating the terms of our existence. The objects we possess may begin to possess us. What started as a simple choice becomes a subtle manipulation, a quiet imposition of the past onto the present. And so we must ask ourselves, are we truly in charge of the objects we keep? Or have they, over time, begun to shape and define us in ways we never intended? As we reflect on the objects that fill our homes and hearts, we come to realize that we are not simply passive participants in a world of possessions. We are, in fact, engaged in an ongoing dialogue with these objects, a dialogue that speaks to our deepest desires, fears, and unresolved emotions. The objects in our lives are not just things, they are powerful forces, shaping our thoughts and behaviors in ways both subtle and profound. The question we must ask then is not just what objects we keep, but why we keep them, and whether we are truly in control of the conversation we are having with the things that surround us. In the quiet moments of reflection, when the noise of the day fades away, we might be left to confront the objects in our lives that we've overlooked for so long. The clock that ticks steadily in the background, the bookshelf stacked with well-worn pages, the chair that has shaped itself perfectly to the contours of our body. Each one is a marker, a presence, an agent of influence in ways that we often fail to acknowledge. They are woven into the fabric of our routines, our identities, and even our emotional landscapes. Yet these objects, seemingly harmless in their simplicity, can hold deep power over us. Power that operates not on a grand, overt scale, but in the small, seemingly inconspicuous ways that invade our minds and hearts. Objects can become symbols of a life we long for, or a life we wish to escape. A piece of jewelry given in love may feel like a constant reminder of affection, but when that love is lost, the same object becomes a symbol of longing, of pain, of things that cannot be reclaimed. The old coat you wear to ward off the chill of the evening. Its fabric may be warm and comforting, yet it may also carry with it the weight of memories you cannot escape, of a season that has passed, a time when life felt different, when you felt different. It's not simply the object itself, but the emotions and memories it embodies that give it power. And in those memories, sometimes, lie the very forces that pull us in directions we don't always understand. Then, there's the curious tendency to collect objects that we know are not entirely good for us. Maybe it's the trinkets we accumulate from travels to far-off places, or the things we buy impulsively to fill some void within us. Each of these objects, whether we realize it or not, is an attempt to hold on to something outside of ourselves that we believe will fulfill an inner need. These possessions, whether sentimental, decorative, or even purely functional, are more than just physical things. They become symbolic of the internal state we wish to maintain. It's as though we invite them into our homes not only to be part of our space, but to shape it in subtle ways that reveal things about our own personal struggles, our yearnings, and our unspoken desires. But what happens when we allow these objects to accumulate unchecked? When we keep them not because they serve us, but because they fulfill an emotional need that we cannot address directly? Over time, these objects, once insignificant, begin to weigh heavily upon us. They can begin to obscure our view of the present, casting shadows over our potential and drawing us back into old patterns of thought and behavior. The more we cling to the past, the more we allow these items to define who we are and who we've been. They do not merely sit idly on a shelf or in a drawer. They become anchors, weighing us down, preventing us from moving forward. And worse, they may start to shape our identities in ways that we no longer recognize, subtly convincing us that our value is linked to these external things. Perhaps then the true danger of objects is not their physical presence, but the emotional and psychological space they occupy. We may believe that we are in control, that we are the ones who decide what to keep, but in reality, it's often the objects themselves that decide for us. They choose to remain in our homes, clinging to our memories, reminding us of times we would rather forget, or pulling us back to a place we cannot seem to leave. It is as though they weave themselves into the narrative of our lives, whether we wish them to or not, guiding our thoughts and emotions in ways we cannot always see. The more we hold on to them, the more they hold on to us. In fact, this quiet exchange, this unspoken relationship between object and owner, can become almost insidious. Over time, what began as a simple possession turns into something more. It is no longer just a thing. It becomes an extension of ourselves, or perhaps an extension of a version of ourselves that we are not sure we want to be. We hold on to these objects because they provide comfort, because they serve as tangible connections to something greater than ourselves. Yet, in doing so, we often allow them to dictate the very course of our lives. They hold within them memories, emotions, and histories that may no longer serve us, yet we are reluctant to let go. What began as a small piece of the past becomes a chain that links us to it, binding us in ways that are difficult to untangle. And what of the objects we invite into our lives without thinking? The ones that accumulate over time, without our active choice, often through the act of consumption or convenience. A new gadget, a piece of furniture, or a fashion trend. These items may seem harmless, even beneficial at first. They are meant to make our lives easier, more comfortable, or more enjoyable. Yet each one carries with it a small piece of its creator, its maker, its origin. It is not just a physical object, it is an idea, a force, and an energy. And over time, this energy may start to influence us, shaping our desires and our choices without our full awareness. The more we acquire, the more we become entangled in the currents of desire, of consumption, and of attachment. In this way, objects are not simply passive things in our lives. They are active players in our stories. They engage with us, sometimes gently, sometimes forcefully, but always in ways that affect our thoughts, emotions, and decisions. We might choose an object because it seems to offer us a sense of control, of comfort, or of identity. But as we accumulate more things, we find ourselves less in control and more controlled by them. The more we hold on to, the less freedom we feel. The more we surround ourselves with, the more it begins to shape the way we see the world. and the way the world sees us. What we choose to bring into our homes, into our lives, carries with it the potential to shape who we are, who we have been, and who we are becoming. The objects around us are not just things. They are part of the fabric of our existence, woven into the very essence of our being, shaping us in ways we may never fully understand. And so, the question remains, how much do we allow these objects to define us, and how much do we allow ourselves to redefine the relationship we have with them? We must come to realize that while objects may shape us, it is not through the things we collect or accumulate that our true identity is defined. Our worth, our purpose, and our freedom are not found in the material world, but in the hands of the one who created us and redeemed us. Jesus came not to fill our lives with things, but to fill our hearts with his love, to set us free from the chains of attachment, fear, and longing that often hold us captive. He offers us a way to live without the burden of possessions controlling us, to walk in the freedom of knowing that we are valued not by what we own or what we have collected, but by the love he has for us. Jesus teaches us that where our treasure is, there our heart will be also. If our hearts are bound to the things of this world, we will remain in chains, ever longing for more, never fully satisfied. But when we set our eyes on him, the true treasure, we find ourselves free, not just from the material, but from the fear and emptiness that materialism brings. The objects we hold so dearly may remind us of who we were or what we've lost, but the love of Jesus calls us to look beyond them, to find our true home in him. Let us remember that he is the ultimate possession worth seeking, the one who offers us eternal life and peace, free from the weight of things that never truly satisfy. Through him we can find the strength to release the objects that bind us and embrace the life he has called us to, a life filled not with things, but with his presence, his purpose, and his everlasting